Peanut butter. Is it worth making at home from scratch? At its core, peanut butter is little more than peanuts and salt. 3 cups of nuts and a half teaspoon of salt for this recipe. No specialty ingredients, easy enough. And we need to make a butter out of this. And butter stemming from the word batter, meaning to beat. In the case of peanuts, we really need to pulverize them. And the best tool for this is a food processor. Maybe you don't have a food processor, not everyone does. I guess you could make a peanut butter with really low-tech equipment. You could do it stone ground, old school. "15 minutes later, and this is all I've got." Yeah, you really should have a food processor or a blender for this recipe. It's worth having one that's decently sized and won't burn out with long processing times. Either dish out money for a good one, or hit up your local thrift stores, definitely. Good models can be found for $10, affordable to even the most frugal. And a blender will work for this recipe too, you'll just have to scrape down the sides a little bit more often. Process is simple enough. Put the ingredients in, turn the machine on, wait 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how smooth you want your butter to be. It'll start out by chopping into pieces, and then it'll eventually gather together into this sort of ball shape that kind of runs around the edges, but just let the machine do its work, and it'll eventually smooth out. To get the smoother consistency, you really do have to run it for at least 10 minutes. But that's really the biggest downside to this recipe. The upsides? It's so easily customizable. You can roast your peanuts extra to get even more roasted flavor. I love doing that. But be careful and go slowly if you do that, they can burn easily. You can add more or less salt to the mix. You can make it sweet by adding sugar or honey. You can throw in some almonds if you want a variety of nutty type ingredients, or you could just as easily make cashew butter or almond butter with the same method. You can make it crunchy versus smooth. And speaking of smooth, if you want your homemade peanut butter to be stiffer just like the mass-produced product, mix in a little bit of shortening. It's also more scoopable if you refrigerate it and cool it down. That will give it a thicker texture. So is homemade peanut butter cost effective? It depends on what you're comparing it to. Plain peanuts cost pretty close to the same amount of the cheapest brands of peanut butter, but compared to specialty all-natural brands, much cheaper there. Some of us can save money with homemade. It's a great recipe because it's easy to make and even easy to clean up too, just one dish to wash. The quality is very comparable to what you'd get pre-made, and the flavor is pretty much equal, and it also stores pretty well. In an airtight jar, you can keep it in a cupboard for 2 weeks, or for a few months in the fridge. Is it worth making at home from scratch? For most of us, probably not. It's just so cost-effective to buy it pre-made, and it doesn't taste that much better homemade. But if you like specialty natural peanut butter with minimal additives, maybe you want to cut down on sugar or add other ingredients, and you have a food processor, absolutely.